All right, get ready because today we're going to dive into something kind of wild, the idea of abolishing suffering.
Yeah, I'm really abolishing it.
Not just coping, but actually getting rid of it, like for good.
It's a big idea.
Huge.
Right? You might even be thinking, like, well, isn't suffering just part of life?
Yeah, totally.
But that's exactly what we're going to dig into today and
Hmm.
challenge that idea.
Yeah.
Our main source material for this deep dive is a manifesto called A Manifesto for Revolutionary Ludic Suffering Abolitionism. It's by Ludic.
Catchy title.
Yeah.
What's it all about?
Well, it goes deep into this idea that we can actually move beyond all those negative emotions we usually just accept as, part of the human experience.
Fear, anxiety, shame, that feeling of never being good enough.
Right, all those.
We've all been there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what if those things weren't just like hardwired into us?
What if they were more like, I don't know, glitches,
Glitches, yeah.
bugs in the system that we could actually fix?
Whoa.
That's what Ludic is exploring here.
Okay, so not just trying to be happy all the time, right?
No, not at all.
It's deeper than that.
It's about unlocking a deeper level of authenticity and creativity, even moral clarity that often gets stifled by all that negativity.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's break this down a bit.
Sure.
So suffering abolitionism, what does that actually mean? How does this manifesto say we can make it happen?
Well, the main idea is to address the root of those negative emotions. We're talking biology here.
So like brain stuff.
Exactly. Imagine rewiring those neural pathways, those patterns in our brains that trigger those feelings.
So not like a sci-fi brain implant turning everyone into emotionless robots.
That's a good question.
It's the first thing that came to my mind.
The manifesto is really clear about this. We're not talking about becoming some kind of unfeeling zombie.
Right.
This is about keeping the richness of human experience,
Yeah.
but freeing ourselves from the grip of the really debilitating emotions, the ones that hold us back.
So how do we even separate those things, like pain that protects us from harm versus suffering that just weighs us down?
That's key.
Yeah.
They use this great analogy of anesthesia.
Okay.
Think about surgery. You don't feel the actual pain of the cut, but your body can still sense that something's happening.
Oh, interesting.
So maybe we could do something similar with our emotional experience.
Separate the warning signal from the agonizing feeling.
Right. Recognize danger, but not be paralyzed by fear.
Now, that is a thought-provoking idea.
It is. And the manifesto argues that this distinction is super important for understanding what suffering abolitionism could really do.
It's not about getting rid of feeling altogether.
More like refining it.
Refining it.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It's nuanced.
So how does this manifesto link eliminating suffering to stuff like status anxiety, all that consumerism we see?
Oh, that's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Think about it. We often buy things or chase approval, try to fit in because we want to feel good enough. But it's all driven by this fear of being judged, right?
I'm totally guilty of that.
Are we all?
Like, sometimes getting that new gadget or the latest fashion, it's not really about the thing itself.
It's about quieting that inner critic.
Exactly.
The manifesto argues that a big chunk of our consumer culture is just this desire to escape those bad feelings. So if we could deal with those feelings at their source, we could break free from all those cycles of wanting and needing.
Wow, that's deep.
Right. It really makes you think.
It does.
What if we weren't constantly trying to fill that void of insecurity? What would our lives even look like?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
The manifesto paints this picture of a world where we could, reclaim a kind of childlike way of being.
Oh, okay.
That uninhibited joy and curiosity you had as a kid before you learned to worry about judgment.
You mean dancing like nobody's watching?
Exactly. That kind of liberation.
I like it.
This is a world where we're free to be ourselves, truly ourselves, without that fear of disapproval holding us back.
And this affects more than just like individual happiness, right?
But absolutely.
It's got to be bigger implications here.
The manifesto says that freeing ourselves from these negative emotions, it could unleash a wave of creativity, innovation, genuine connection.
Stuff that's being stifled right now by fear and all that.
Right, exactly. And this transformation, it could even change how we relate to each other and the whole world around us. Imagine a society where empathy and compassion aren't burdened by distress and guilt.
Empathy without distress.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Okay, now that is really interesting. But wouldn't that make us less caring, less compassionate overall?
That's a common worry, and it's addressed head-on in the manifesto.
Okay, good.
They argue that it's totally possible to understand and respond to other people's needs without being overwhelmed by their pain.
Hmm.
In fact, this kind of empathy, they say, it might actually be more effective, more sustainable in the long run.
Okay, now we're getting into some really mind-bending stuff here.
It is. It is.
We've got the basics of suffering abolitionism down.
We're on the same page.
But how do we actually get from where we are now to this, I don't know, utopian future?
That's where the revolutionary part really kicks in. There's a whole
Yes.
plan laid out in this manifesto.
A plan, huh?
Yeah, it involves radical changes, starting with using cutting-edge technology,
Intriguing.
creating experimental communities like Think Pioneers, paving the way for a global transformation.
This is getting more and more fascinating. So stay tuned, because next time we'll dive into the practical steps, the challenges of actually bringing this radical vision to life.
You won't want to miss it.
Trust me, folks, you won't want to miss it. Welcome back, everyone. Last time, we were talking about a world without suffering, a world where we could be our true selves, where creativity and compassion can really thrive.
Yeah, it's a powerful vision.
But how do we actually get there from where we are now?
That's where the revolutionary part of this manifesto comes in, remember?
Right, right.
It lays out a whole plan, and it all starts with technology.
Technology, huh?
Yep, things like gene editing and neuroimaging.
Whoa, okay, we're talking about actually changing our biology here.
It might sound like sci-fi, but the science is getting there.
Yeah.
Scientists are already figuring out how emotions work in the brain, and they're developing techniques to, like, fine-tune brain activity.
This is blowing my mind.
It's pretty amazing stuff.
I've always been fascinated by how technology can unlock human potential.
Me too, me too.
So how could these technologies actually help us get rid of suffering?
Well, the manifesto talks about gene editing, like CRISPR.
CRISPR, yeah, I've heard of that.
It could be used to target specific genes that control our emotional responses.
So we could rewrite our DNA to get rid of those negative patterns.
It's a big idea,
Huge.
and it would definitely require a lot of ethical consideration.
Of course, of course.
But the manifesto argues that the potential benefits are just too big to ignore.
Okay, and what about neuroimaging? How does that fit in?
Neural imaging lets us see what's happening in the brain in real time.
Like a window into our thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. We could see the neural processes behind emotions.
That's incredible.
And that could help us develop personalized interventions.
Oh, so instead of a one-size-fits-all approach to dealing with suffering, we could have treatments tailored to each person's brain.
Precisely. The manifesto talks about targeting specific neural pathways, essentially rewiring our brains to experience the world differently.
This is getting really deep.
It is, it is.
But I have to ask, even with these amazing technologies, isn't there a risk of messing things up?
Absolutely. And the manifesto acknowledges that.
Good.
That's why it emphasizes going slowly, starting with small trials and making sure there's ethical oversight every step of the way.
So like being cautious and responsible as we move forward.
Exactly. It's not about rushing into a radical transformation overnight.
Right, right.
It's more like a carefully planned evolution of human consciousness.
That makes sense. The manifesto also mentions these special enclaves. What are those all about?
Oh yeah, that's another key part of the plan. They're like dedicated spaces, kind of like research hubs or even experimental communities.
Where people can try out these new technologies and ways of being.
Exactly. It's a controlled environment where we can see how things work,
Yeah.
and make adjustments as needed.
Like a testing ground for a new way of life.
In a way, yes.
But these enclaves wouldn't be totally isolated from the rest of the world, right?
Right. The manifesto is big on transparency.
Okay, good.
They'd be open to scrutiny, with independent ethicists weighing in.
So it's about building trust and ensuring that this whole thing is done responsibly.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, the manifesto compares this movement to other revolutions in history.
Oh, really? Like what?
Things like the fight for civil rights or gender equality.
That's an interesting connection.
Just like those movements challenge systems of oppression, suffering abolitionism aims to dismantle the tyranny of negative emotions.
So it's about recognizing that freedom from suffering is a basic human right.
That's a powerful way to put it. And the manifesto argues that it's going to take a global effort to achieve this.
With international cooperation and new policies to ensure everyone has access to these technologies.
Exactly. It's not about just developing the technology. It's about making sure it's used to benefit all of humanity.
That sounds like a massive undertaking, especially given the state of the world today.
It's a huge challenge for sure, but the manifesto argues that the potential rewards are worth it.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about reshaping civilization here.
It's about creating a world where compassion, and creativity can truly flourish.
Okay, so we've got a plan, we've got the technology, but let's be real, wouldn't a world without suffering be kind of
Wow.
boring?
That's a question a lot of people have.
Yeah.
And it gets at a misunderstanding about what suffering abolitionism is really about.
Okay, so it's not about eliminating every challenge or conflict in life.
Exactly. Life will always have its ups and downs.
All right.
But imagine facing those challenges with a clear mind, without fear or anxiety dragging you down.
So we'd still experience difficult emotions, but they wouldn't control us.
Right. We'd be able to approach things with a more open, engaged mindset.
That ludic spirit the manifesto talks about.
Precisely. It's about embracing the full range of human experience, the good and the bad, without being trapped by those negative emotions.
This is really making me think about what it means to live a good life.
It's a profound shift in perspective.
But what about art? What about storytelling? Wouldn't a world without suffering change those things completely?
That's a great question, and it's something the manifesto explores in depth.
Okay, good, because I was wondering about that.
It argues that getting rid of suffering wouldn't make art less powerful.
Really?
In fact, it could lead to a whole new era of creative expression, something even more profound and authentic.
Okay, but how would that work? Wouldn't art lose its emotional depth if there's no suffering?
Remember, we're not talking about eliminating all emotions, just the negative ones.
Right.
Artists would still have a full palette of emotions to draw from.
But without the negativity that often drives art.
Exactly. Imagine art that explores the full complexity of life, the joys and sorrows, without relying on suffering for drama.
So instead of focusing on pain and tragedy, art could explore things like resilience, growth, the beauty of being human.
Precisely. It could celebrate life, explore consciousness, delve into relationships in ways we can't even imagine right now.
This is really challenging my assumptions about the role of art in society.
It's a whole new way of looking at things.
It's not just about entertainment, it's about reflecting on what it means to be alive.
Exactly. And in a world without suffering, art could play an even bigger role, helping us connect, make sense of our experiences, imagine new possibilities.
This is all incredibly thought-provoking.
It is. It is.
But I know there are going to be people who are skeptical about all of this.
Of course. And the manifesto acknowledges that.
Okay.
It encourages open dialogue, invites skeptics to look at the evidence, to hear from people who are already on this path.
So it's about having a conversation, exploring both the benefits and the risks.
Exactly. Transparency is key.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the practical steps of implementing this vision to the philosophical and artistic implications.
It's been a wide-ranging discussion.
It's clear that this manifesto is calling for a radical shift in how we think about human civilization.
It's a bold vision.
But is it possible? Is it desirable? We'll explore those questions in the final part of our deep dive, where we'll take a look at what a post-suffering world might actually look like from the individual level to the global scale.
It's going to be fascinating.
Welcome back to our deep dive, everyone. We've been exploring this idea of a world without suffering, a world where humanity can reach its full potential. We've talked about the technology, the steps involved, but let's really try to picture it. What would a post-suffering world actually look like?
That's where things get really exciting, you know?
Yeah.
Trying to envision this world transformed. It's tough, though, because suffering is just so ingrained in everything we know.
Yeah, it's woven into our lives, our societies, everything.
Right. But the manifesto encourages us to really use our imaginations here. It offers some pretty amazing glimpses.
So let's zoom in first.
Okay.
The individual level.
Yeah.
If I woke up tomorrow in this post-suffering world, what would be different? Would I even recognize myself?
That's the question, isn't it? The manifesto is clear that abolishing suffering wouldn't erase who you are or make you emotionally flat. It's more like, imagine all those anxieties and insecurities you carry, just fading away.
So I'd still be me, but without that constant inner critic.
Exactly. Think about pursuing your passions with this new sense of freedom and confidence. Imagine tackling challenges with curiosity, even playfulness, without that fear of failure or judgment holding you back.
That sounds amazing, honestly.
Yeah.
What about relationships? Would love and connection feel different in this world?
The manifesto suggests we'd experience a deeper level of empathy and understanding.
Deeper.
Yeah. Imagine communicating with people from this place of genuine curiosity, without all that defensiveness and baggage we usually carry.
So no more like passive-aggressive comments, no more resentment bubbling under the surface.
Well, conflicts would still happen, of course.
Right, that's realistic.
But imagine resolving them with more clarity, more compassion, focusing on really understanding each other's needs and finding solutions that work for everyone.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could really change things. How might this whole suffering abolition thing change the way we build our societies and institutions?
Well, the manifesto argues that our systems right now, they're mostly designed to manage suffering, not prevent it or eliminate it. Think about healthcare, for example. What if it focused on maximizing well-being, not just treating illness?
So we'd be proactively fostering people's health, both physical and emotional.
Exactly. And education could be about cultivating curiosity, creativity, critical thinking, without the pressure of tests and that fear of failing.
What about work? Would we still have jobs in this world?
The manifesto talks about work becoming a source of meaning and fulfillment.
Not just a way to survive.
Right. Imagine using your talents and passions for projects that benefit everyone and that you genuinely enjoy.
This sounds so utopian.
It's a big vision, for sure.
But wouldn't there be some downsides? Like, what about motivation and drive? If there's no suffering to push us forward, wouldn't people just become complacent, unproductive?
That's a common question. The manifesto argues that motivation wouldn't disappear, it would just come from a different place.
Okay, explain that.
Instead of fear and scarcity, imagine being driven by a desire to create, to contribute, to connect with others.
So it's more about intrinsic motivation, purpose, passion.
Exactly. And this shift could actually lead to even more innovation and creativity because people would be free to explore their passions without that fear of failure.
It's like unlocking a whole new level of human potential.
That's the idea.
But what about art? I mean, so much of our art, our literature, draws power from exploring suffering. Wouldn't a world without suffering mean a world without great art?
That's an interesting point. It definitely sparks debate. But remember, suffering abolition isn't about eliminating all negative emotions, just the ones that cause real distress.
Right, right.
Artists would still have a whole range of emotions to express, but their work might take on new forms, explore different themes.
So instead of focusing on pain and tragedy, art could explore things like resilience, growth, the beauty of humanity.
Exactly. You could celebrate life, explore consciousness, dive into relationships in ways we can't even fathom right now.
This whole manifesto is making me question everything I thought I knew about human nature.
It's powerful stuff.
And what about the ethics of all this? Who decides what counts as suffering? How do we make sure these technologies are used responsibly?
The manifesto doesn't shy away from those ethical questions at all.
Good.
It emphasizes open dialogue, transparency, democratic oversight to make sure these technologies benefit everyone.
So it's not about forcing a particular vision of happiness on everyone?
No, it's about giving people the power to shape their own lives, free from the constraints of suffering.
This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive.
It's been a journey.
We've explored this bold vision, from its philosophy to the technology, and it's clear that this manifesto is a call to action.
A call to reimagine what's possible.
But ultimately, the choice is ours. Do we want to create this kind of future?
The future isn't set in stone. That's what the manifesto reminds us.
We have the power to choose.
And by imagining a world without suffering, maybe we can start to build it.
So what do you think, listeners? Does this resonate with you? What are the biggest challenges you see? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Keep exploring these ideas, and let's work together to create a world where everyone can truly thrive.
This deep dive has been an exploration of possibility. And while the road ahead might be tough, the destination is worth striving for.
A world without suffering.
A world where humanity can truly flourish.
That's all for our deep dive into revolutionary Ludic suffering abolitionism. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep imagining a better world. We'll see you next time.